Mgtow values here. And I was raised to understand in no uncertain terms that women, all women, have agency. This analysis is meant to uncover a variety of social sicknesses, and in no way do I condone the initiation of violence against anyone. Don't let the happy music fool you. This ain't a happy analysis. This is agency. This is rights and responsibility to act. Freedom, to accept duty, to prove one's merit in the world independently. Agency for men has been like this. The rights, responsibility to publicly get one's head blown off, to prove one's love of country. Women first demanded agency, notably in the Seneca Falls Sentiments and Resolutions of 1848, and got the vote after the First World War. Let there be no mistake in assuming that women acted to prevent war. They did not, and the White Feather campaign of World War I is evidence of this. Today, unapologetic second-generation feminists such as Camille Paglia support the agency of women, while fourth-generation feminists like Lena Dunham suggest that trauma is a silent killer. Look at this picture, Lena Dunham. There was no silent trauma with this beheading. None at all, I imagine. Women of the second, third, fourth, and intersectional are shouting that women are not to be objectified as sexual objects for men, nor indeed as the sacred birthing vessel of community sustainability. No, indeed, women can do everything a man can do. And so, let us listen to a simp whose identity will remain hidden for reasons that will become obvious.
Just how easy it is to come up with a story and fool the entire world. Now, as I said before, my initial disclaimer, I am a father, husband, son, grandson, and I have women all around me in my life, and I'm a partner to a woman as well. I love women, I adore women, but I also see the pattern of things happening in society, and I see the trends, and the trends are, and I'm not here trying to excuse, because when 60, 70 women come out and say that Bill Cosby used drugs to incapacitate women in order to have his way with them, as recently as 10 years ago, you gotta take notice of that.
Okay, this guy loves women and thinks that women agreeing to party it up with Bill Cosby and call him back and ask for more is something to take notice of. It is odd, however, that he does not mention the fact that these women repeatedly calling Cosby back should not be considered women's agency, women's free choice to do everything a man can do. Perhaps this simp is indicating that these women should go to Cosby's house with a chaperone. Did this man have a chaperone? Did this man call back and say, "Let's do it again"? No, I'm sure he did not. Let's listen to more of this simp.
People like Bill Cosby and stuff like that, yes, he may be a psychopath, he might be a rapist, he may be true the things they said about him, or it may not be true. What I do know is that you need to consider the times that he came up in. He came up in the 60s, 70s, freewheeling 80s, when sex, drugs, rock and roll, Playboy mansions, Playboy bunnies, and all that stuff was acceptable. In the 60s and 70s, stewardesses were treated like basically waitresses in the air, in the airlines. Man, I remember when I was a kid and I used to travel on airplanes, I was a kid. Stewardesses would get their butts pinched and just go, "Oh, it's like that," playing around, whatever. I remember working with my dad in a factory when my dad was a foreman in a factory, and I used to remember how men treated women in the early 80s in a factory. And women also. Women were the reason men came to work. Women were the reason that made such a mundane, boring job like factory work in a women's garment factory. Women would dress sexy. Women would be sexy. Women would bring in lunch. Women would have themed nights, themed days where they would bring in certain types of food to the factory and stuff like that. There was always this symbiotic relationship of men working with women, and women, I don't know if it was a cultural thing because it was mostly Hispanic, but in that culture it was like mostly, and that's another thing I'll say, cultures around the world, the men and women relations are very different. Brazil, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Cuba, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Men still hold that role in society where it's very, very male, where it's women are here as the most beautiful creatures that God gave us for our pleasure, for us to view. That's the view of men in machista, all right, cultures. Well, so around the world it's different. I'm not talking about the Middle East where they look down on women, or where they behead women for doing some ridiculous thing, or they torture women, or they do a lot of crazy stuff to women. I'm not talking about that. That's ridiculous, insane, and psychotic, and of course, that's criminal. I'm talking about just normal admiration of women, men flirting with women throughout all of, as long as I've been alive. You're a construction worker, you're working hard in the heat and the sun, whatever, beautiful women pass by, and you're like, hey, baby, it makes you feel good. And when that beautiful woman, girl, whatever, turns around and acknowledges you and just smiles at you, it made your day. It suddenly made that hard labor work bearable. Just because of that smile that girl gave.
Yes, so he begins by placing the actions on the freewheeling times, and then goes to say it is good to have women as objects. This simp is attempting to destroy all agency of men and of women. Yeah, this guy views catcalling as appropriate in this day and age because of the validation it gives to a man when the woman responds. I think the current generation of feminists would string this guy up. Maybe this guy also liked a smile from a young, pretty woman. Yeah, well, who cares?
And so those kind of situations happen. I've seen, listen, when I was in high school, not even, when I was in 8th grade, I'll tell you a quick story. I just throw them all out there, right? When I was in 8th grade, one of the stories that was the most traumatic stories of my life was, you want to be one of the cool kids, right? So I cut class one day, cut school, and I went with this guy named Ernesto, lived on my block. And he was like one of the cool kids. He was a tall, handsome guy, He was like, hey. And he had this beautiful blonde girlfriend, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I remember that we all cut class. We all cut school that day. And I just went tagging along, following. I was a little younger than him. And we all went. And when I say we all, I mean me, Ernesto, because he picked me up at my house because he lived in my house, in my block. Ernesto, me, his girlfriend, and like 6 other guys from school. We all cut out and went to the park. And I'll never forget this. It's like it happened yesterday. We went to the park. There's this huge park in Brooklyn. And it's like the division between Brooklyn and Queens. And it's called Highland Park, to those of you that know. We went to Highland Park, and we're just cutting class, just hanging out in Highland Park, walking around. It's like spring, right? And make a long story short, things happen. This is Ernesto's supposed girlfriend, but he doesn't get attached to girls, right? He was Mr. Cool, right? He had a lot of girls. But this was the girl that was like fawning over him, going crazy over him, whatever. And this was for the most part his girl that hung out with him all the time, okay? Make a long story short, he basically turns to her like in the movies. He says, do you love me? Of course I love you, baby. Whatever. And prove it to me. Make a long story short without getting too graphic, because this is something that traumatized me at the time. This poor girl wound up having to have relations with 6 guys. And they all basically just did whatever they wanted to this girl. And all I remember from that, and I want to discuss here, is at the end, he was like, do it. What are you, faggot? Do it, do it. And I was like, come on, man, leave her alone, man. I don't want to get jumped by 7 guys. So I just stood by the side, and I wanted to cry, man. I wanted to cry with what they did to this girl. But she was willing to do it because she was, after this guy Ernesto. So she didn't give herself any respect, but still, when she, I've never understood the mindset of those type of guys that would treat a girl or a woman that way. And obviously as a father today, I would go ballistic on a guy that did that to one of my daughters, But the girl, I was the guy that was there when they all ran off, the jocks, they ran off laughing and giggling and laughing. With her, of course, stains all over her. I took off my windbreaker jacket and I gave it to her, I put it on her, and she was crying, her hair was all dirty, And I took her home. So that was what I would classify as rape. That was gang rape. I witnessed a gang rape. But those are things that are never spoken of. But see, let's imagine now one of those guys is now running for office 40 years later. And now that girl comes out of the woodwork and says, hey, Ernesto, when we were 16, 17, this is what happened. I was gang raped by all these guys. Obviously, there's a statute of limitations. There's nothing that can be done. But it's at least she would say it just as a character reference about that guy Ernesto that was a pig and was a complete jerk and was a complete animal even back then. I can't even think how a guy like that, or even the other guys who did what they did, how they would, what kind of men they turned out to be in their lives. But there's a lot of men that think that way. They objectify a woman. They don't see a woman. So I'm not even talking about those animals. Those animals deserve to go to jail. Those animals deserve to have a crappy life. Those guys deserve what they get in life.
Ah, here we have the throwing of men under the bus. Cosby and all those men must be guilty because this simp is guilty. All that guilt after all those years, pent up. This simp is willing to listen and believe anything to escape his guilt. Probably like most of those 1,600 simps who signed this New York Times letter. As he described it, this was not a gang rape, but a gang bang, as she, the Yugo girl, consented, actively, freely, doing what she had been encouraged to do by the feminists. Use your agency just like men. An old-fashioned fuddy-duddy daddy had better just shut up. And her mama probably said, you go, girl, and show the men that you are equal in your agency. But no, our friendly simp says, this young woman should not be given the agency to make her own choice. Camille Paglia and Gloria Steinem et al.? Do you disagree with this man that this woman should not have the agency to make this decision to prove her love? And because of this, these men are animals, less than human. The young woman in the story decided to have sex, and the young man in this picture decided to risk having his head blown off. Maybe we should prevent this man from having this agency. Oh, but we have to grant this man the agency to die, but not a woman to have sex. What hypocrisy! Women want agency. Women have it. There's no reason at all for men to lose their heads. Men have been freed by feminism and now know that two groups can never be satisfied, the simps and the feminists, both with their contradictory thinking that women can both have and not have agency. This is insanity.
Okay? But that's the problem. The Bill Cosbys, who on the one hand had this perfect persona, and then on the other half was, was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, was this monster. Because, again, you don't have to incapacitate a woman. I mean, what were you thinking? This is a highly educated man, a highly extremely smart man, a highly extremely supposedly good man, whatever. I just think it was just like behaviors that were carried over from another era, that those things were acceptable. I mean, you hear stories about back in the days of these celebrities, Playboy bunnies going to the Playboy mansion, doing stuff, and hey, here's two girls, go to that room over there down the hallway, and blah, blah. So a lot of these women were not angels to begin with, per se. A lot of these women, even the woman that finally got him down, that woman, she the only case that stuck. What is it? Strand, whatever. She had been shut up before. She was given hush money before. She was down for the program before. She had done stuff with him before, and all this kind of stuff. And then when that money stopped, she decided to go ahead and readdress or break her contract that they had in court and readdress and come back after him or whatever. So everybody, there's always two sides to a story. I'm not defending Bill Cosby, and I'm not defending any of these guys out there that, that wind up looking for, that take advantage of their positions of power. Dude, if you're running for, the guy that's running now for Congress or governor, whatever the heck, I don't even keep track anymore. And it's 30 years ago, even though there's statute of limitations on that, but it's just a character reference. It's this woman who has to say, hey, look, he does not deserve to be in Congress, or he does not deserve to be a governor, or he does not deserve to be in the White House. This guy has this type of personality, this type of character, this type of flaw in his behavior.
After a lot of doublethink, this simp says, I am not defending these men for abusing their positions of power. Oh, so now we arrive at the white knight height of simping, where women are lowly and must not rise above their station. They must be protected from their own desires to marry up, to hypergamate. They cannot have enough agency to decide on their own fate, and must be protected, not allowed to play with the big boys. No. Or the big boys cannot be allowed to reach down and see if a woman wants to play with him. This simp is proposing a Western gender caste system. But still, oh yes, this simp tells everyone that we must believe a woman detailing an alleged event 30 years ago without any corroboration, because she must be telling the truth just because this simp witnessed a woman agreeing to a gangbang and he was disgusted that this woman would agree to do such an act. But one must ask, is he just as disgusted that this man would agree to an act that gets his head blown off? Does this disgust him? Should he listen and believe all men?